Hey, hey, hey. Good morning. We're checking in, making sure you guys can hear me, as I sure often you guys sure can. Okay, you guys can hear me, and I'll sign out of this. I'll get over here, and I want to update you about obviously some severe weather that we're going to be dealing with today in some cases here. First and foremost, weather impact meteorologist Gary Frank with an update on what we're going to expect, and I'll talk about what we're going to expect here over the next 12 to 24 hours. This is another weather impact alert day. First and foremost, severe weather is possible later tonight, but it is much less severe and much less widespread. That's the key factor. I cannot stress that enough, that we are not going to see the same setup, and I'll explain why and where the core of the severe weather is today. But I just want to point that out because I know there's a lot of anxiety, but we also want to prepare you for some stronger storms that are expected over the next several hours. And so as I put this, you can text me and I'll look at the Facebook comments as well and do my best to talk about some of the specific threats. Overall today, I think we're all in a similar threat in terms of severe weather, and we look at our what's going on here, and I'll put this on a full screen for you so you can check things out. I do think, as far as temperatures, we're starting to warm up here around 70 degrees, and you're going to continue to look at off to the west. That's the core of where things will change, right? And when we're kind of looking at this specifically here, you'll notice as I show you we're starting to see a few storms start to fire up even now at this morning. And so that's kind of interesting here as we look at a few storms that are developing. Also, even as we put a different version of the radar on, there are a couple of storms that are still going to be possible. They are not quite as significant here as I zoom in locally, but there are still some storms from north of Troy, Truxton, north of Forestel on 70. And as I look off to our west, that's where we see storms near Warrensburg. This is not severe, and we're not expecting them to be at this point, but it's something that we're paying attention to because even that cloud cover may make a difference in terms of what our temperatures are going to be later on today, and that could limit our instability. Right, so I'll put this in a loop and you can see where that line starts to fizzle out. Watch how, it develops, but it doesn't really hold together. I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that we're not seeing that unstable air just yet. Here's where the core of the severe weather I expect to be, and it's all part of where this surface low is going to be, and you'll see that it's right about here now. And along this specific line right here, we're going to see storms develop. That's where this dry line of air is feeding in. This moisture is feeding up ahead, and you can see that here. That's where I expect us to see the core of the severe weather development later on today. For us right now, we've had clouds and rain this morning, and our most recent update from the Storm Prediction Center tells us that the core of the severe weather right now has even increased a little bit. And it's closer to Rolla, but it's not there. So if you're traveling on 44, I want you to pay attention here as we look at from Lebanon all the way to Springfield, Joplin. This is the core area for severe weather. And if you'll recall the other day, we had a moderate risk for severe weather that was in place for us. As we look from Fort Smith, that's where the core of it is. But if you look locally, that includes areas in, Rolla, of course, in Phelps County, Crawford County, Washington County, and even into Gasconade County, where you're under that enhanced risk for severe weather. That, I don't want you to get too specific about it being right over Washington, St. Clair, Union. Really has to do with the timing and our main threats, right? Most of the city of St. Louis and really most of our area, I think the big difference here from earlier this morning is, if I look at this and pull this back out on me just for a second, is we had a few of our Metro East counties closer to central Illinois. They were in that marginal risk. That, to me, that's really the main difference that we've seen at this hour right now. Otherwise, most of us are in either a Category 2 or Category 3, and I would say overall most of us are in that lower end threat of a Category 2 of 5 from the Storm Prediction Center. Like I said, this is not going to be like it was the other day, but I do want to break down the specific threats, as I so often like to do at this time, because from a hail standpoint, we have things that are not quite as significant. That hatched area where you see these black lines, that's where the bullseye for significant 2-inch hail is expected, and you see that here from mainly that lines with the moderate and enhanced risks, right? And most of that is out of our area. For a tornado risk, this is the difference. This area right here that is in the hatched line area, and I'll circle it again for you, right here, this entire area right here where we have that hatched area where it's orange and red, that's the bullseye for strong tornadoes. And when I zoom in here locally, you'll notice that none of our area is involved in that. There still is a tornado potential. However, they are brief, weak tornadoes. Doesn't mean they won't happen, and it doesn't mean we don't need to pay attention to them, but are they going to be the same strength that they were just a couple days ago? Absolutely not. That is not where we're settled into, and I'll show you why here, and I'll even show you our machine learning program that we look at every time, and I try to show you here. This is from not only locally here at SLU, but Colorado State, and its comparison to the one I just showed you. And you'll notice here on the left where the bullseye of the orange and red, that first one, obviously in central Kansas, is positioned near that low. It's in the tornado probability on this machine learning. The highest that it says is 35%. And that's in central and eastern Oklahoma. Now, a good portion of the state of Missouri is in that 15 to 20% range. But, you know, like I said, for us, it is in the 2 to 5% range. So I think it's very important. I think it's very possible, but like I said, the core of the severe weather for us is not in our area as it stands. So that's what I want to pay attention to it. And here's why. One of the reasons for is not only is it near the catalyst, is going to be right near that low, but look at the storm energy here. As we look off to the west right now, watch how this starts to develop, and you'll see that from Kansas City all the way down south. The core of that energy is right out ahead of that front and that dry line, and you're going to see that. We don't have that kind of potential energy. We had that the other day, and that's one of the reasons that our storms were so robust, and some of them were able to take advantage of that environment. We don't have that, but we still have some higher end energy, and watch how this goes throughout the rest of the evening, overnight, and even through 10 or 11 o'clock. There's still energy around, and I think it will fuel those storms, and I think that's really important here. As we continue to look at some things, I think eventually that's going to move out. I do want to show you what a future radar may look like here at this point as we talk about this. And you'll notice that I think even maybe slowing things down a little bit. If you followed me along here for this morning, for today in St. Louis, we started to see 7, 8, 9 o'clock. And watch this line that settles in. This is the line that I think that we're going to have to pay attention to very closely here as we look outside, because I think by 7 or 8 o'clock, some of these may create a 40 to 60 mile an hour wind gust. And if we get to 60, that's where we see that severe thunderstorm warning. And you'll notice that as well, closer to working our way into Phelps County, Dent County, Crawford County. Watch as I let this go a little further. Now, it's not out of the question that one or two of these spots here, let me click this again. It's not out of the question that one or two of these spots, it does not want to, let me click. One or two of these spots here may rotate a little bit, and we'll get one of these brief tornadoes on the leading edge. That is not out of the question whatsoever. So I want you to be prepared for it, but these are brief and weak. These don't have the strength that we had earlier, but it's still something that we'll monitor. Now, as we go into the overnight hours, watch how this still through 1 or 2 o'clock is around, and we'll see that transition mainly to the Metro East. We're going to see periods of very heavy rain, but like I said, this is where some wind gusts of 60 miles an hour don't need to be, but obviously, like I said, the potential is there, and that's what we're paying attention to. I don't think this is a high-end severe threat for a lot of us, but I want to talk about some of the main severe weather impacts that we have so far. As we look at high wind between 50 to 70 miles an hour, hail up to quarter size, and brief tornadoes. Like I said, this is a much different event than what we had just days ago. And when you talk about some of this just from what we'd seen days ago, I do want to point out the fact that when you look at, you know, our specific storm survey, and I talked about this a little bit here, you know, our specific storm survey, which I explained in more detail on a different story I'll post on ksdk.com, the rating for an EF3 was 152 miles an hour out to almost a 23-mile length. And so, you know, I think that was one of the things that when you looked at some of the data points here, not everybody got that type of damage. And really the way that these storms are surveyed is that we went throughout the entire region, and you started out with, you can go street level, and you can see that here specifically here right off of Big Bend, and as it gets further into north of the zoo, you see that these areas north of the zoo, that was where we had wind damage in the zoo. The tornado path was north over Lindell, Forest Park Parkway, and then into DeBolivar, and that's where you started to see it as it crossed Del Mar into Fountain And then, like I said, once it got into North City, that's where we started to see a few of these spots like Labadee, and these are the spots where we had the EF3 damage. And I'm telling you, when you see the pictures and videos we share with you, that was the main difference, is it was significant. Now, also the other thing that we point out is this is much different than what we would typically see, as you have, spots that, people think it's not going to cross the river. It certainly did, and went into Granite City, Pontoon Beach, and eventually over 255 and 70, and then closer to Edwardsville, and that's where this tornado concluded at SIUE. So like I said, the main story for us is the fact that this is not going to be like what we just had. It is still a weather impact alert day because, for one, we know, first and foremost, that we don't need any rain on top of what we had. In an ideal situation, the next 4 or 5 days, we're dry, we're sunny, we're clearing things out. That's not going to be the case. But this is not a widespread severe outbreak. This is going to be something that is possible. We'll see some low-end severe limits, which may sound the tornado sirens, right? It may absolutely do that. We may see 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 tornado warnings. It's not out of the question. Those are low-end tornado warnings. These tornadoes may last for less than 15 minutes. They will not be like what we had the other day. And that would be on the high end of things, right? So like I said, this is where the core of the severe weather is. And here in the next couple of minutes, I don't see too many questions, so I'll end this simply because we've got Show Me St. Louis coming up here and they're using the studio. So I want to talk to them about that. But here's what we're dealing with from Springfield to Oklahoma City. This is where the core of the severe weather is. We're on the edge of it. And I do think that we'll have some stronger storms. There's no doubt about it, right? 60-mile-an-hour wind gusts, maybe 70, maybe some quarter-sized hail, and maybe a tornado or two. Like I said, the risk is still there. But those are the main things for us here as we talk about this from, like I said, from a 50 to 70-mile-an-hour wind threat up to quarter-sized hail with brief tornadoes. That is the main threat. And this is not a significant severe weather outbreak that we're dealing with, but that's what we're dealing with here in the short term, like I said. So these are the impacts. Like I said, let's expect that from a standpoint of our severe weather threat, let's be prepared as early as 6 p.m., especially from west to east. But realistically, I think it may not start raining in some areas till 8 or 9. And as it does so, it will create that through 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Now, all hazards are possible. Like I said, a tornado is possible, wind damage is possible, and some larger hail up to quarter size is possible. This is on the low end side of things, and I don't expect that we're going to see some big severe weather outbreak. I'll attach this video to our story on ksdk.com. I'll leave this up for you shortly, and I want to make sure that you guys are prepared. And I know Scott will be in to do some updates for you later on. And like I said, we'll prepare for this, and I'll leave you with this future radar. As like I said, Show Me St. Louis is coming in. They're going to take over the studio, so I want to make sure that they're ready and prepared. But like I said, this is what it looks like in a future radar. I do expect this is a little bit more similar, 11 o'clock, 12, 1 o'clock. I want you to prepare to be able to get warnings overnight in case. That way we can update you here on 5 Plus as well. And like I said, I will put this in our story on ksdk.com so that you guys can take a look at it. So send this to your friends, prepare, and don't be scared because this is not like the last storm, but we want to prepare you here as we talk about what's going on here over the next 12 to 24 hours as we prepare for our next Weather Impact Alert Day.